in Sydney, where these undecided voters will be asking the questions of the two leaders vying to be Premier at Saturday's election. Now, they'll be asking the questions, we'll be getting the answers over the course of the next hour. This is a very tight contest. There is tonight a great deal at stake. Would you please welcome Premier Gladys Berejiklian and Opposition Leader Michael Bailey. All right, thank you both for coming along this evening. We're going to get to as many questions as we can tonight, but we're going to begin with some opening statements from the two leaders. We did have a coin toss a little earlier. Michael Bailey, you're going to open the batting for us tonight.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you, David, and thank you, everyone, for being here. Exactly 4 years ago, this government made a promise to you. If you let us sell your profitable electricity assets, all your lives will be better. Electricity prices will go down. We'll build a whole heap of stuff that'll make your lives better. Well, 4 years later, they didn't just sell electricity, they sold $70 billion of your assets. And they've wasted on blowouts, on projects like the WestConnex and the light rail, $14 billion of those. $14 billion from the 70, your money. They're at war with the environment. Think a million dead fish in Menindee. They don't believe in climate change. And then to top it all off, a few years ago, the biggest insult of all, we're going to spend $2.2 billion knocking down and rebuilding perfectly good stadiums that most of you will never walk into. It's a government that doesn't listen to communities. It doesn't listen to people. And you know what? It doesn't have to be this way. If I become your Premier, I'll listen to you, I'll learn from you, and I'll put your policies into actions. It doesn't have to be this way. There is a better way.
Mr Daly, thank you. Gladys Berejiklian.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm really excited to be here because having people involved in our democracy makes society better and certainly gives us the free advice we need to hear as elected representatives. I'm really passionate about the future of New South Wales. I've had enormous opportunities being raised in this wonderful state, and I want to make sure that every single person, no matter where they live, no matter what their circumstances, has the chance to be their best. When we first came to government, the budget was absolutely a disaster. New South Wales was coming last in every single indicator. Unemployment was the highest in Australia, and we had no money to do anything. We've turned that around. And what we've done by turning that around is now make investments into the community. Record investments in road and rail projects, schools and hospitals, as well as investments across the board. But what really matters to me is not just building those projects, but also providing the services people need across the state and taking pressure off households and families, because no matter what the state's finances look like, no matter how many projects we're building, we know that many families, many individuals have the cost of living pressures, and because we are in such a strong position, we're making sure that we give back to the community by reducing those pressures, and we actually have the lowest bills. I know everybody is concerned about their energy bills, but we actually have the lowest now in Australia, and we've got a number of programs to help reduce that further.
Thank you, Premier. We're going to get straight into the questions. Thank you for those opening remarks. We might begin right here in the front row. Over to you.
Hi, my name's Sarah and I have a question for Gladys. It's been the hottest summer ever and we cooked out here in Western Sydney the last few months. Just in the last day, the New South Wales Liberal Treasurer has doubled down on his position that, and I quote him, "Climate change spending is a gratuitous waste." Between your Treasurer's words and Scott Morrison flip-flopping on coal and digging up Tony Abbott and Malcolm Turnbull's energy policies, it seems that your party can't get a consistent position, much less action on climate change. Why is it so hard for you and your party to understand that this is a critical concern, especially for people who live in this area?
Yeah, Sarah, thank you very much for your question, and I completely appreciate that people who live in Western Sydney do experience a few degrees hotter than everybody else in the rest of Sydney. I'm extremely proud of the fact that we're the first state government that actually has a tree canopy policy for Western Sydney. We're planting 5 million trees because more shade means actually cooler circumstances and less concrete. We've actually planned ahead to see what we can do to make Western Sydney as livable as possible into the future. In terms of climate change, we have a $1.4 billion climate change fund, and we put that towards programs across the state, including here in Western Sydney, to help communities reduce their power bills, but also think about ways in which they can be more sustainable. I know this is a really important issue, and a lot of people care about it, as do we. But I'm really positive about the future in this area, and because we appreciate the special circumstances you have here in Western Sydney, we've actually got detailed plans for Western Sydney. And in fact, the new city we're building around the airport at Badgerys Creek, we're actually calling a livable city. First and foremost, we're going to make it green, lots of open space to make sure people have those amenities they have elsewhere, because I appreciate exactly what you're talking about. And in relation to temperature, I also want to say, because of our strong budget position, we've now got air conditioning, or in the process of getting air conditioning in all Western Sydney schools to make sure the children don't suffer those extra temperatures. So we are looking at every opportunity we have to reduce that stress, but also to plan for the future. And I'm incredibly proud of our 5 million trees we've got planned to plant. And also, if you look at our Greater Sydney plan for Western Sydney, as I said, we have a specific policy for tree canopy, which has never existed before.
I think the question also went to divisions in the Liberal Party, though. Do you agree that some of your colleagues have very different views on this?
Well, I can only speak for the New South Wales government. I'm not going to speak for anybody else. And as far as the New South Wales government's concerned, we're all united. We've had consistent policies in this regard, and all of the initiatives we put forward, like our solar bonus or our solar panels incentives, all the funds we're investing in to support climate change activity and sustainability, have the full support of my party in New South Wales.
OK, look, the question was to the Premier, but Michael Daly, I'll give you an opportunity just to respond to that.
The climate change policies that we're taking to the election is a part of a raft of policies that I have to say, David, I'm most proud of. We've got 500,000 solar bonuses for houses that want to put rooftop solar on their house over 10 years. That'll remove the equivalent of about 4 million cars from our roads. But what we know as well is that in about
solar bonuses will remove cars from the roads?
No, the emissions, the equivalent of emissions.
I see.
Of 4 million cars from our roads. And it'll power 3 million homes. But the big thing is we know that coal-fired power generation in New South Wales is coming to an end in 2036. And we have to start to plan now for that transition. So we've got a plan for 9 gigawatts of clean, green, cheap, renewable energy. And that sets us apart from our opponents because we actually believe climate change is real. And I stuck my neck out the other day, David, as I do, sticking up for people and talking out on things. When there was a rally with school children who wanted to take leadership on climate change, young leadership, I backed them in 100%. And my opponent said that was the wrong thing to do. And I backed those young students. This is about them. I have 4 children and I don't want to get old and have them say to me, you squibbed at Dad when you were the Premier or when you're a Member of Parliament, because now we're struggling to catch up.
So if you're Premier,
action now.
You will encourage kids to strike again?
I'll encourage them to take leadership. And on exceptional occasions like that, on really crucial issues, I'll back them in. Yes, I will.
So if they did one last year, if they do it once a year, would that be OK?
That'll be fine.
No, I have a different view. I want kids to be passionate, whether it's climate change or any other issue. They should be passionate about it in the classroom, and if they want to exhibit or demonstrate how they feel, they can do it outside school hours. Schools should be there for kids to attend and learn. But having said that, I know it's an important issue. I know young people feel strongly about it. But I'd like to encourage them to have those debates and discussions within school hours, and then outside school they're free to do what they want.
Would either of you approve a new coal-fired power station in New South Wales?
Well, I can't see any applications coming forward. There's no plans for that. I can't see it happening. I can't see it happening, David.
If one did?
They'd have to go through a very robust process, but I can't see it happening.
I don't want any more coal-fired power stations in New South Wales. The coal industry has a future in New South Wales, but not in generating power.
So you'd block an approval?
Oh, well, we'd have to change the law to do that. I'm not advocating that at the moment, but I can't see a time when there will. We're not going to build one as a government. Private industry have shown no inclination to do it.
Let's move on. Can we get a question right here?
My name's Janine. I'm a bookkeeper and a grandmother, which leads me to this question. I would like to talk about the future of the water for the Sydney Basin. In particular, I know all of New South Wales needs water, but I'm looking at Sydney. The Warragamba Dam, you're talking about putting a wall, building the wall higher? Okay, so we have 4 dams. The youngest being 60 years old when the population was 2 million. We're near 6 million now. And a 15-metre wall, or whatever height you're doing, is not going to solve the problem in 30, 60 years' time. You know, the Warragamba Dam has suffered stress and had a lot of problems. So my question to you is, has either of the party looked at new dams within that could feed water into Sydney without taking out of the Shoalhaven, by the way, because it has to draw from a lake when it gets to 75%.
All right, good question. We might start with Michael Daly.
You can't keep indefinitely raising the dam wall of Warragamba. It's destructive. It'll destroy the World Heritage listed park up there. We don't support lifting the dam wall. There are other ways to do this, and the smartest way to do it is recycling of water. I live in Sydney's eastern suburbs, and there's a sewage treatment there, Malabar, which takes all the sewage east of Parramatta. And I know in Sydney's western suburbs, the councils are doing terrific work out here with tertiary treated water. But the way of the future is recycling, not sewage, but stormwater and water harvesting of other sources like that. You can't keep raising Warragamba dam wall. And of course, there's another option as well, which is a desalination plant. But the answer is not more dams.
Another dam. You're saying no more dams.
We'd have to assess them on their merits, but I can't see where Sydney would source more water from the dams.
Has a beautiful valley area up there that could be made into a dam. We could also move another dam wall down further down on the cataract, which is now 112 years old, that wall. If a new wall was built further down the valley, you would also have another large capacity dam. Raising the Warragamba wall is just not on.
I agree with you there.
All right, but you're saying no to all those other options?
Well, I just think they're too environmentally destructive. We have to look at other options first.
Premier?
Yeah, we have a different view on Warragamba. We feel we need to raise the Warragamba dam wall, and it's out there in public policy. Firstly, to protect houses and, well, first of all, lives and property in Western Sydney and the Hawkesbury, because the assessments that we received said you have to raise the dam wall to protect communities into the future, and that's the first reason we're doing it. The second reason is it does help with storage capacity and a bit of water storage into the future, although that's the secondary benefit of doing that. The first benefit, and I'm not going to make a misstatement, the first benefit is to protect lives and property should there be a massive flood.
Okay, let's just get...
No, that's okay,
and I think the question went to other dams.
Yeah, we're not looking at any other dams in the Greater Sydney area. We are in the regions, and we've made a commitment in relation to that. But I think there's definitely more we can do around water storage and more we can do in relation to how we... I mean, the coastal areas get too much water, the inner areas don't, and we've got to be more creative in how we manage that, whether it's through incentivising individual people to store water or other incentives. So I think there are absolutely water security is not just a big issue in Western New South Wales, but here in Greater Sydney. But I do want to make clear that we think it is sound public policy to raise the Warragamba dam wall, and I'm concerned the Labor Party isn't doing that because it will protect property and lives, but also improve water storage capacity as well.
Okay, let's get a question right here. Ma'am, we might just... we'll get that microphone onto you there.
Good evening. My name's Donna. I'm a manager in the public service in Sydney. My concern is domestic violence. 1 in 3 women in New South Wales are reported as victims of domestic violence. What does your government plan to do, both state and, if you can comment, federally, to support those victims, not just women, but the children, men as well? And what services can you offer to assist those?
Let me do you first.
I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.
Donna.
Oh, Donna. Donna, thank you very much for that important question. And I'm incredibly proud of what we did when we came to government. There's more to do, but for the first time we actually have a Minister for Domestic Violence, and she works very closely with all the justice agencies as well. And one of the proudest things we've done in relation to supporting women and families and men in domestic violence is actually improving the justice system so that the victims have the courage to speak up. Because previously the onus was on victims to justify why they were victims, and we've actually turned that on its head to make people feel a bit more courageous about raising those issues. But most importantly, education programs are so important, especially in our schools, and it's about respecting everybody, respecting everybody's ability or freedom not to suffer emotional abuse, physical abuse of any description. I'm proud of the fact we've taken a whole-of-government approach. We just haven't said this is a law and order issue, quite the opposite. We've said this is a social issue, an education issue, and we now have a number of programs which we're sponsoring across the state to really reduce the rate of incidents occurring, but we're also putting more energy into prevention rather than just crisis management. So making sure that we support families who are undergoing stress, support families who actually see the signs of this emerging before it gets to crisis. But the proudest thing that we've done is have a whole-of-government approach to the issue. Minister Goward's done an outstanding job. And the current Police Commissioner, before he became Commissioner, was actually the Chief Officer in the police force who dealt with these issues. And so we've worked together with police, but most importantly through our social agencies, to really deal with what is a huge problem. I don't think there's a single person who isn't impacted in some way through a relative or a friend who's suffering as a consequence. And thanks for raising it.
Yeah, look, thank you very much for the question. In 2014, this government cut $20 million from domestic violence shelters. It was without warning. The sector went into shock. And those of us who are MPs felt the brunt. And I'll tell you a little story. There was a young mum came into my electorate office. I remember her very well. Her name was Lilia. She had a little autistic boy who was about 8 years old and a daughter who was about 12. She sat down in my office and took her sunglasses off and she had 2 black eyes. Her husband had just beaten her up. She lived in my electorate office all day for 3 days. At night we took her to other shelters, and I'll give them a plug, David, if you don't mind. Jewish Care, they do terrific work, but they couldn't keep her overnight, so she'd come back and live in my office during the day. This went on for 3 days until we found her a spot in social housing. So first thing we're going to do, $200 million on more social housing dwellings. The second thing, my Shadow Minister Jenny Aitchison has done a terrific job with talking to the whole domestic violence sector, and we've announced a $158 million package for domestic violence. It's the biggest injection the sector has ever had. The core of it will be 200 extra places for people just like Lilia and her children. We'll have a specialist domestic violence court, family violence court, and we'll give recurrent funding and capital funding to the not-for-profit sector to keep doing their terrific work. This is a scourge, and that's why I've already announced that if I become the Premier, I'll bring the domestic violence portfolio back under my control as Premier. Everyone has to take responsibility for this because social change is the best way to effect lasting change. The attitudes to family violence have to stop, and men have to stop laying hands on their women.
Let me just get a response. Did you cut $20 million and why?
Quite the opposite, David, and I'm incredibly proud of the fact 2 years ago in our budget we boosted support for domestic violence victims and families by record amounts in New South Wales, and that's because we actually combined all the agencies. When we came to government, each little agency was dealing with it separately. We brought it all together and gave a record boost, and in fact we've boosted the opportunities for women to have safe housing during a crisis, but also preventatively to make sure that if they're feeling unsafe or intimidated, they can actually have somewhere safe to be. Okay. So we've actually increased resources.
So where's that claim from, Michael Daly?
It's all in the budget papers, but talk to the sector.
I'd ask him to verify it. Can I please ask him to verify it after the debate?
Anyone in the sector will tell you that.
No, we've actually increased funding. I'm incredibly proud of that.
Might have done it last year, David, but in 2014, there was a
I just asked him to verify it.
There was a shockwave that went through.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
5 years ago, so it's not relevant.
But it changed the nature of the shelters.
OK, let's get another question. Thank you both for your answers on that. Does anyone over here have a question, sir? Just if we can get... Thank you.
Great. I just had a question on the Anti-Discrimination Act. Under this Act is protection for religious schools, so they can make decisions regarding their students and their employees that ensure the person admitted is compatible with the school's religion. So this allows them to say no to, say, a student or an employee who's in, say, a same-sex relationship or is transgender or is on a religion that's different from the school. Do you both support retaining that protection under the Anti-Discrimination Act, or will you be amending it in some way?
Michael Daly, we'll start with you.
I'll have to have a look at that, but you'd have to go a long way to convince me that people can be discriminated on the basis of their sexuality, I have to say. So we'll sit down and work with the sector, with the education sector on all of these things and take their advice. But as I say, you'd have to go a long way to convince me that someone should be discriminated against and lose their job because of their sexuality.
Are you referring to the Federal Anti-Discrimination Act?
That's happening at the federal level, but once the federal Parliament moves, there's a good chance New South Wales Parliament will move as well. So on that discrimination point, there's an argument that if you do make this change, you're discriminating against religious schools, because if you look at the right to equality under international human rights instruments, it makes it clear that the right to equality protects grounds such as religion. So how do you respond to that kind of argument that if you change?
Michael Daly, you're saying, though, you would not want religious schools to be able to discriminate on the grounds
of... What I've said is, they will talk... What I've said to all of the religious leaders and educational leaders who've spoken to us is that we'll wait and see what happens at the federal level. Then we'll talk to them. We won't move without consulting them.
What's your view, though?
My view is that people shouldn't be discriminated against because of who they are.
So you would not allow religious schools to discriminate on the grounds of sexuality?
Don't extend me where
I'm just trying to clear up what your answer is.
My personal view is that in this day and age, you'd have a tough time trying to justify that someone should get the sack or shouldn't be employed on the basis of sexuality. But I have given...
What does that mean in practice, though? Would a religious school be able to discriminate on the grounds of sexuality?
Well, I've said that before I have committed myself to any legislation and having had a look at what happens at the federal...
We've got an election in 3 days, Mr Daly.
Well, I've said that I would talk to the religious leaders and in the educational sector and take their views and so as to not ambush them. You've asked me for my opinion.
OK. Gladys Berejiklian.
Oh, David, firstly, I think it's important to have a national approach to this issue because you don't want 6 different states having 6 different laws about this. And I support the same principle. No child, no teacher should feel they don't belong somewhere because of who they are. And it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, what your background. We're an inclusive society and I feel very strongly about this as a daughter of migrants. It doesn't matter what your background is or what your circumstances. Everybody should feel comfortable in their school environment. But secondly, in relation to anti-discrimination, I just wanted to make the point that I'm very proud as a government that we amended our state anti-discrimination law, provision 20D, to actually put in stricter provisions against anybody saying anything hateful or disrespectful based on someone's race or religion.
Okay,
and that was something...
Sorry, just to come back to the very question, though, would you allow religious schools to discriminate on these grounds?
Well, look, at the end of the day, I don't think anybody would advocate that a child should face discrimination because of who they are.
So that's a yes, you would not allow them to do that?
Well, yeah, in fact, I would say even the schools themselves would say that no child... Okay. I mean, the schools themselves have said we don't discriminate and we won't have discrimination.
OK.
Yeah.
Let's get another question. Who's got... Yes, sir. Can we get a microphone here? Over to you.
My name is Earth. I've got a question to both you. The public spending for youth mental health this side of Parramatta is absolutely disgraceful. It's virtually almost non-existent. To the point where if a child fronts up to the hospital here, say if they have a panic attack and agoraphobia, I've seen firsthand, they turn those children away without even a mental health assessment. They're told to go to Westmead. Westmead won't accept them because they're not in the area. Out here, unless you're full of money, there's nothing. And what are both you going to do? Because I've spoken to the member for Londonderry over the phone and she wouldn't even talk about the issue. She just sidetracked. And if I talk to a Liberal Party person, they won't even answer me.
So just to explain that, if you turn up at what Nepean Hospital is saying with a mental health illness as a young person, you're being turned away right now.
Well, when I took one of mine, there was no mental health check because the funding is only for adults.
Yeah.
There is nothing.
OK. Premier.
Was it Earth, your name? Earth, thank you for the question. And I feel passionately about this issue. And one of the proudest things that we're doing in all of our public high schools across the state is putting 2 mental health experts in the schools. Because a lot of the time the teachers tell us and the counsellors tell us a lot of the children, they can identify the kids that are struggling, but often they don't have the expertise or the ability to give each child that attention. So we are now employing 2 mental health experts in each high school, public high school across the state, especially for this reason, because as you know, the system unfortunately deals better with crisis than prevention and support and counselling, which is what we want to address. And for that purpose, we're making this significant change in policy because we appreciate we need to prevent people getting to a crisis stage. But we know the pressure and stress on school communities because they can... First of all, students might self-identify, but teachers often say to me, Gladys, we can see the children that are struggling, whether it's anxiety or bullying or depression. And one of the things I'm proudest of is that every school will have 2 mental health experts within the school. But we have also given extra support to referral services and mental health organisations outside of school.
But let's just turn to the question, which is about when you do get to that crisis point and what happens at hospitals further to the west than Parramatta, like here where we are, if a young person turns up with a panic attack, will they get a mental health check?
Oh, absolutely. That's the intention. If they're not, I'd love to please give me the details and we'll follow up.
So you'll follow that up?
Absolutely, Earth. Okay. And I I'm sad to hear that you didn't feel your family was supported. I'm really sad to hear that, and please, if I can have your details, I'll make sure I follow up. But can I say I feel passionately about this issue, and I appreciate this digital age is putting extra pressure on young people in particular, and we have to deal with it by providing more support.
Michael Daly.
Yeah, you're not alone, sir. There are many families now, increasingly so, who are having issues with their young people and mental health. Excuse me. One of the impediments to mental health, though, in our hospital system is the fact that our nurses, the mental health nurses, are under incredible strain. I went out to Nepean Hospital about a month ago to announce an upgrade out there, and one of the young nurses came up to me and said, "Mr. Daly, I've wanted to be a nurse my whole life, since I was a little girl, but I'm a mental health nurse now." And the other night I was looking after 11 patients on my own with inadequate security. I don't want to leave the profession, but if you don't help us with nurse-to-patient ratios, we can't go on. So we've announced 5,500 additional nurses in New South Wales, not just by pumping more nurses into the system, but by legislating, by mandating for the very first time in New South Wales, nurse-to-patient ratio. So in mental health wards, 1 in 4 nurses, 1 in 7 at night, plus 250 additional security guards. That will remove a big blockage in the system and make sure that people are looked after more adequately than they are now. And the nurses are just overjoyed with this. They've been asking for this for a very long time.
Can you give any assurance with this situation that someone will get the mental health check they need?
That's a different issue to the nurses' number of nurses.
Yes, indeed. So just coming back to this issue.
Yes. Yep, we'll put extra money into the hospital system to make sure those checks are.
David, am I able to respond in relation to the staff issue?
Very quickly.
Just to say that in relation to staff, since we've been in government, we've put on an extra 14,000 frontline staff in our hospitals to take the pressure off nurses, so nurses, midwives, allied health professionals, and we're increasing that number into the future by another 8,000. So it's really, the staffing is one issue, but it's really the specialisation, and I think the issue that Earth has identified is a specific area we do need to do better at.
It's a really important one. So
and we do need to do better at it. I'm not going to say we're dealing with it as we should now, because the demand is so high, and we do need to deal with it better.
All right, we're going to move on to our next question, but it has just been pointed out to me that our previous question on religious schools did not come from an undecided voter. Sir, I'm told you are an Australian Conservatives candidate in this election. I'm not sure how you've managed to work your way into the audience here. We'll follow that up later. But for those who are considering whether this influences their vote at all, we just want to be transparent and apologise, of course, for the fact that we had a question there from a candidate rather than an undecided voter. And we apologise to both of you as well.
It still sounded undecided, though.
Look, it's an issue I know some people are still very legitimately concerned about. However, let's get to an undecided voter, though, if we can. Can we get the microphone just down here? Over to you.
So my name is Kari and I'm a nursing student. So my question is, you said you're going to increase the numbers of nurses and patient ratios, and that's all good, but I want to know if there's going to be an increase in support for newly graduated nurses, because not all of them get into a new grad program and then they're forced to take positions that they're not ready for, and they haven't been trained to deal with that level of patients. And until those patient ratios are enforced, they're looking after more patients than an experienced nurse should be taken care of, and they're straight out of uni.
Well, Michael Daly, to you first.
All of those transitional arrangements will be part of that package. We've been talking to the Nurses and Midwives Association for a long time about this package. They will assist us with the transition and the training and all those things that you talk about. And look, they're a great outfit, and they'll help us do that in conjunction with the department and all of the experts, and input from people like you.
Kari's absolutely right, because in the past, even people who graduated as nurses were finding it difficult to get into the public system in New South Wales. I actually had a friend's daughter who graduated and then had to do something else a few years ago because the system was difficult. But what we've done now is set up alliances with all the institutions, university and tertiary institutions that have nursing students. You are gold, Kari. We need more nurses. We need more students to actually study nursing so that we can meet our commitment of 5,000 extra nurses, because if we don't encourage people like you, and thank you, because if people like you don't take up the opportunity to go into nursing, we won't have enough. And so you are gold, but I also think the point you raise is absolutely valid, because in the past we haven't been very good at managing that transition, and we haven't been as good as working with the universities and the nursing institutions to actually allow that flow through. We're much better at that now. We have alliances with the universities to ensure the graduate program makes sure that the new graduates are put into appropriate roles, but also that they're having enormous job satisfaction. They learn as they're getting trained so that when they are in a hospital situation, they're able to deal with the circumstances. But I love it when young people actually say to me, I'm studying nursing because we need more of you. So thank you, and hopefully one day I'll bump into you in a public hospital, and thank you for your efforts.
Curry, you are gold. I think there'll be general agreement on that. Let's get a question over here, sir.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Paul. I'm from the Penrith area, and I actually do go to these stadiums that Mr. Daly said no one's going to go to. I love my footy. My question's regarding the stadiums, and there's a lot of talk, we could spend the money here, we could spend the money there. We are upgrading the stadiums. Do you have any idea of how much extra income that's going to generate? Because I know they talk about, they painted a pretty rainbow down Oxford Street for the Mardi Gras, and that apparently brought in lots of money. So,
Paul,
Premier, why don't you go first?
Paul, thank you for the question. And I have to say, thank you for the question, because I hear that a lot from people in Western Sydney. For many families, going to a sporting event or having their kids aspire to play at a great stadium is actually a positive. And the return to the state will be phenomenal, because for every major event we host, the state gets back about sevenfold in terms of revenue, creates jobs, and also makes New South Wales a destination people want to be. And I want to stress that we are spending record amounts in infrastructure, and the amount we're spending on our sporting stadium infrastructure is at less than 1% of our infrastructure budget.
OK, Premier, before, sorry to be picky, but the question did say, what will the return be? Phenomenal. Sounds great. What does that mean?
The return is, for every dollar we invest over the next 10 years, obviously we have greater opportunities to attract all these events. So it's about, depending on the stadium you're looking at, and the business cases are all publicly available, it's about $3 for every $1 you're investing.
So there's $40 million. $729 on Allianz knockdown rebuild. We'll get 3 times that back?
Well, over the course of the next 15 to 20 years, definitely.
And that's the Treasury modelling? Yeah,
well, it's Infrastructure New South Wales. Okay. And can I say, in case my numbers are slightly skewed, if you look up, the business case has been on the public record for more than a year, and it tells you exactly the return. But I also want to make this point, and for me, honesty and truth is very important in politics. And the Leader of the Opposition is pretending that he wouldn't need to spend anything on Allianz Stadium. It is currently unsafe. You'd need to spend at least $340 million just to make it comply to all the building codes. If you want to refurb it, it costs you $700 million. We're saying you get a brand new stadium for half a century for $729. So I wish he'd be honest, because he'd have to invest at least $341 million. So the difference in our policies is $300 million.
Okay, we'll get to that. Let's just start on the figure that's just been cited there by the Premier. Do you believe that figure from Infrastructure New South Wales?
I stand corrected, but I'll make sure I get the information if I'm...
OK, three times the return.
Well, it doesn't matter what the return is. It's how much you're asking these people to pay for that stadium. Firstly, I don't accept that you need to knock it down and rebuild it, Paul. I love my footy too. I love coming out to ANZ and watching the Rabbitohs.
But how much are you going to spend on fixing it?
Hang on, Premier.
I just wanted to answer the question.
Let's give him a chance.
Okay.
It's not how much money. It's not how much money I'm going to. It's not how much money I'm going or my government's going to spend on it. It's how much these people are going to spend on it. And I've said they won't spend a zot. Because what I will do is make...
Premier. Well, it's all right.
Sorry, everybody.
I will have the newly constituted Sydney Cricket Ground Trust take out a loan for a refurbishment of Allianz Stadium.
And I want to come to... I'll come to that. But the question was about the return on the investment.
You, Premier, so I'd ask you to extend me the same courtesy.
Mr Daly, 3 times the return, you're saying that doesn't matter?
No, it's not it's the return to the taxpayers for the money they're putting into it. Under my model, they don't put any money into it. You still get a refurbished stadium, state-of-the-art stadium, a modern stadium. You do everything there that you can do in the stadium that you can presently do, but more, because it will be expanded. But you don't have to have the taxpayers pay for it.
So what's the total cost under your plan?
Well, I don't know, because we don't know what the stadium will look like when we go into it.
Well,
David,
we have a pretty good idea what it looks like now, and the election's in 3
David,
months.
What I want is for the stadium to be there on the weekend. And the Premier can't explain why the wrecking balls were in there today.
David,
there's 4 days to go, David, until the...
Okay,
what I want is for these people to have their say and not have the Premier move ahead with political spite to knock it down. I want it standing on the weekend so these people can decide what to do with it. That's the difference in our approaches.
David, it concerns me that the Leader of the Opposition has been running on this issue for months, and yet he says he doesn't know what it would cost. The business case and all the costings have been on the public record for a year, and I can tell him now. So he needs to be honest and say how much would he spend.
Well, let's just clear this up. Is it beyond repair now?
Well, it was beyond repair when we had it before, yeah.
But do you agree now there's not much you can do to, you know, rebuild what's there?
No, I don't agree at all. Yesterday I was with the Deputy Government Architect who commissioned and built the thing. Philip Cox, who was the architect, said that it needed a simple refurbishment.
Even now? Even now?
Yes, that's what.
So, okay, so if it is on Saturday, as it is now,
figure for the
what
new
would it
one,
cost for you to do what you want with the stadium?
Well, the Premier's refurbishment figure was $348 million.
No, that wasn't the refurb figure.
She wants to spend $730 on a new one. So there's a big difference. Parramatta Stadium cost $360 million. But this stadium, which is not much bigger, is going to cost $730 million.
Give us
there are anomalies all over the place.
Give us a ballpark number. To do what you want, what would it cost
I'm not into guesswork. What I want to do is inherit the stadium on the weekend, have the experts go in and tell us what the refurbishment will cost, and then I'll talk to the people of New South Wales about what we do with it.
So it
shouldn't be knocked down.
OK, but it may end up costing something similar?
David, I can tell you that the costings are there, so that the Leader of the Opposition has to say the $341 million doesn't get you a refurb. All it does is make it compliant to building codes and safety. A refurb costs $700, and to knock down and rebuild it costs $729. And when you're thinking about the people of the state and the future, you want to think about the next 20, 30, 40 years. So I'd rather spend $729, get a smack bang new stadium, which people are going to love, which has enough female toilets. The current one doesn't even have toilets. Rather than, but I want him to tell me, or sorry, I should be more respectful. I would like him to tell the audience what he intends to spend on that, because it's at the end of the day, it's taxpayers.
I want you to tell the audience why you're knocking it down 4 days before the election. 4 days before an election.
Let me just test the mood on this. Who likes the idea of knocking it down, rebuilding it as the Premier is doing? OK, and who would prefer Michael Daly's approach? There's a few there. OK, and someone had a point on this as well. OK, just there.
My question to you is you're happy spending maybe close to $1 billion on the stadium. Now, why do I have to pay $5 every time I use the toll road on M4? While I go to the stadium just once a year, maybe maximum twice a year, but M4 I could be using every day. So wouldn't I end up spending like $2,500 every year out of my net income?
Yeah.
How much would you spend
That's almost
a year?
$5.
Yeah. So how much would you spend a year
So return
on
trip
the
is like
M4?
$10. Multiply that by 5 days, that's $50.
Well, this is a big issue.
It is a big issue.
Let's start with you, Michael Daly, on the M4, because I think we've shifted into the M4 toll now.
Simple choice, sir, and thank you for the question. We're bringing cash back on the M4. So we believe that the people of Penrith, the people of Western Sydney have paid for that road once already. It became free. You've paid for it. Your tolls paid for it. It was free, and this government's put a toll back on it for 43 years. They didn't tell you about that 4 years ago when they said, let's sell your electricity assets. So our proposition is simple. We will put cash back on the M4. So the choice on Saturday, if you want to travel on the M4 for free, you vote for me. If you want to pay a toll, you can vote for the coalition.
OK, thank you, sir. Let's just hear...
Been a public pledge for many months now, sir.
OK, we'll come to the M7 and the M2.
We've heard those promises before from Labor, and they don't tend to deliver. But this is exactly the point.
Cashback exists.
But exactly.
Let's just let the Premier answer.
Yeah, the point the gentleman made. We know a lot of people in Western Sydney use the M7, use the M2, use a lot of tolls because you're not just using the one. So what we've done as a government to support the community is say if you spend more than $25 a week or more on tolls a week, you get free car registration. If you spend more than $15 a week, you get a big discount. But in addition to that, we look at the household budget. And I hope many of you have gone to Service New South Wales because your household could save literally thousands of dollars on 40 cost of living measures we have across government. So what we like to do is say, if you want to reduce your energy bill, for example, today we spoke about what's called the energy switch. If you tell us what electricity supplier you use or retailer you use or gas bill from May, we'll be able to get you the best deal. And on average, people are saving $400 a year.
We've moved a little away from road tolls.
Yeah.
But just let me ask you, though, you're clear, though, there will be no cash back on the M4 toll?
No, that's our position. There won't be. But what
so when you say New South Wales can have it all, just not that?
Well, do you know what? as you know, that is on a day-to-day expense on the recurrent side of the budget, and we have to manage our expenses. And what the Leader of the Opposition hasn't done is if you actually take the toll off the M4, it means you spend less in a hospital or a school because it's your day-to-day budget. It's not a capital expense, it's actually the day-to-day budget. So what he needs to tell us is which school he's going to take money out of or which hospital he's going to take money out of. They're decisions governments have to make, and I appreciate the sentiment.
Did anyone have a question related to the tolls? I know it is a big issue here. Ma'am, if we can get the microphone just over there. Yes, over to you.
My question is to both of you. At the moment, there's a number of roadworks on the M4. Once these roadworks have been completed from Church Street, Parramatta, through to Northern Road, Penrith, will there be a toll inflicted on Western Sydney drivers on this particular section of the M4? If the answer is yes, from Ms Berejiklian, Mr Daly, if you are elected on Saturday, will you remove this toll if the answer is yes to the previous question, or will you do a Bob Carr?
All right, so just clear this up for us. You're talking about the, as not being a local, the M4...
The M4 from Church Street, Parramatta,
yes,
right out here to Penrith.
And that's currently...
that is currently undergoing roadworks.
But it's currently toll-free, isn't it, from Parramatta to here? It's currently toll-free. And you're asking whether that, once the roadworks are done, will have a toll?
Yep.
All right, let's get a quick answer from that.
It won't under me.
OK, and Premier?
Cashback.
No, but if it's part of the WestConnex project, we've been very public with all of the tolls and they're all on the public record.
And this one, from Parramatta to here, will have a toll or not?
On the M4, yes, that's our policy, yeah.
OK, but...
Well, WestConnex as a project, we've already said will have tolls on it, depending on where you use it. It actually depends on where you get off and where you get on. And that information is publicly available. But I say this, I also know that we need to invest in public transport to allow people to have that option. We also need to make sure we have free roadworks around those tollways so that people can actually have that option of free roads as well. So I completely appreciate the cost of living pressures around this issue. But we're being very honest. We're telling it like it is and saying that we want to take the stress off all the toll roads, whether it's the M2, the M7, the M4, the M5, which has cashback. And we want to make sure we appreciate that people in Western Sydney move around the whole network. They just don't use one road toll. So what we're trying to do is make a fairer system overall. So no matter which road you use, you get those benefits.
Let's get a question right here in the centre. Over to you, sir. It'll find you, don't worry. Just come down in front. Thank you. I thought it would find you.
My name's Peter. I'm a school teacher. I love my job. I love my school. I'm in a good school. I need a convincing argument on this one. I still have to pay for all my stationery and I have to do most of my photocopying at home. And if I've got students who can't afford to buy the books, then I have to sort of pay for them. I need a convincing argument as to what's going to happen with schools, and I am in a public school.
Can you give us an idea, Peter, roughly, you know, you pay for the stationery, you say, for the kids in your class. What's that costing you?
I don't count the cost, but it could be $5 a week, it could be more, it depends. This week I've had to provide 2 books for 2 students who just couldn't afford to buy things, and it came to a matter of $5.
Well, Premier...
But it mounts up and mounts up over time.
No,
I don't mind doing that, but...
Why should a primary school teacher have to do that?
Peter, firstly, can I thank you for the job you do? I went to a public school, and if I didn't have inspiring teachers at my public school, I wouldn't be where I am today. So thank you for the job you do. And if my teachers hadn't seen something in me which I didn't see in myself, I wouldn't be standing here today. So I just want to thank you for the job you do. And we absolutely value our teachers. In relation to schools, we've actually boosted by more than 28% the amount of funding that goes into schools every year. But what we've also done is given the school community more opportunity to decide how they spend the money. Some schools choose to spend it on STEM equipment, some choose to spend it on other things. But I want to make one point clear. There is no compulsory fee for any parents in New South Wales. We know some parents struggle. We ask for I think schools ask for a voluntary contribution, and we ask that happens respectfully, so it doesn't, children don't feel whether their parents can afford to pay or not. But we have given more power to principals in terms of hiring their teachers, but also in how they spend their budgets locally.
So are you saying it's the school's fault that the teacher has to dip into their own pocket?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is schools make choices on how they're spending the budgets we give them. We have increased all the budgets across the board.
So go and see the principal, in other words.
Well, no, I'm just saying that schools make decisions, and I appreciate, and I just want to make this very clear because I appreciate the value of public education. In fact, I don't think there's anything more important a government can do than provide every child with a good education, because if you get a good education, doesn't matter if it's a public school or non-government school, you can be...
I'm sure everyone agrees with that, but Peter, what do you say to the point that your school's decided to spend the money on, I don't know, sporting equipment instead of...
I would agree with what you say, but I think that if we had more money put into the budget, or if the budgets were improved, like my spending on photocopying per year, per term is only $250.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a lot of my photocopying at home because I need more than that.
Yeah.
All right, Michael Daly.
Well, one of the things that the P&Cs tell us, sir, is that they're filling the gap for a lot of those expenses as well in schools, and you shouldn't have to be paying for those sorts of things. So one of the things that we've announced is that we'll give every P&C in public schools in New South Wales a $5,000 grant, $5,000 to help them pay for small bits and pieces like that, so that'll take the load off you having to do that. You shouldn't have to do that. But the other thing we're doing in the education sector is funding with a future shortened government, 100% of Gonski. There'll be 5,000 extra teachers to bring the Gonski funding, the fair funding, the teachers like to call it, up to 100% in New South Wales for the first time ever.
And when will that happen by?
As soon as we get a daily and shortened Labor government.
We've already done it.
And,
we're already committed to that. We're the Gonski state. New South Wales signed up to Gonski first. We've actually...
So what's the difference?
77% at the moment. We'll fund it to 100% with the Commonwealth.
We've topped up public education funding in New South Wales over and above the allocation we got from the federal government. The amount we're spending in education...
Will you get to the Gonski benchmark, though? That's his point.
Well, we've already achieved that, and we've also supported our non-government schools as well. So in relation to Gonski, we're the first state to sign up to it.
Not 100%.
I'm sorry?
But not to 100%.
Yeah, we were the first state to sign up to it. We absolutely were. And we've invested over and above what the federal government allocation was, because the federal government gave extra funding for non-government schools, and we said, hang on, we're going to make sure our public schools get that additional funding as well. So we actually topped it up. And I'm incredibly proud. If you look at all the states and what they put in public education per population, look, I'm not suggesting that there's not more to do. And as Peter highlighted, there is more to do. And I'll be the first one to say that. But you can't do more unless you have a strong budget. They left us deficits with no money. We're actually making sure we have the money to put in.
But you are promising to spend a lot more on schools, to be clear.
100% of the Gonski funding, not there at the moment.
And what's the dollar difference?
I don't actually understand what his policy is on that, I'm sorry.
Well, just explain to us. How much more are you going to spend?
Look, I can't remember the exact figure, David. I'll have a look at it. I just can't remember off the top of my head what the figure is. But it's 100% with the Commonwealth of Gonski funding. At the moment, it sits at about 77%. That was the benchmark that Gonski recommended.
Do you know off the top of your head how long it would take to get to that figure?
We'll get that done over the first 4-year term.
OK. Let's move on. Yes, sir, right there.
My name's Jordan. I'm a plumber from Western Sydney. And speaking about all these works that are going on, I want to know about the people and the kids that are going to come and do these works. What is your government committed to doing to incentivise more children, or more teenagers, to become tradesmen and do these trades?
Great question.
Michael Daly, thank you. What we're doing is 600,000 free TAFE courses over 10 years in areas where there are skills shortages. So in plumbing and electrical trades, in building and construction, not just in the trades, but in aged care, disability care and youth care, 600,000 free places, because these are the industries that where there are skill shortages in New South Wales currently, and not just in Sydney, but also right throughout the regions. And one of the things that we'll do for TAFE as well, particularly in the regions, is give them more flexibility over their own budgets. So, for example, David, I spoke to some TAFE teachers in Broken Hill. I went and saw the fish at Menindee and spoke to the people in Menindee, and the TAFE teachers said out there that what happens in the regions is that the bureaucrats in the city take a cookie-cutter approach to funding TAFEs in the regions. They need some flexibility so they can deliver courses for their towns so that young people won't leave. They're sick of young people going, in the example of Broken Hill, to Victoria and Queensland for training, not coming back. We'll allow them the flexibility, but 600,000 free TAFE courses over a 10-year period in skill shortages. And what we'll do, as industries change and there are shortages that emerge in other industries, we'll will change those figures and change those industries as well.
All right, Premier.
David, firstly, I want to say when we came to government, they'd left us the highest unemployment in the nation. New South Wales now has 3.9% unemployment, which is the lowest on record. Are there pockets of challenge? Absolutely. Is youth unemployment a challenge? Absolutely. But what I'm incredibly proud of is we've created literally tens of thousands of extra jobs because of all the roadworks we're doing, because of the train lines we're building, because of the schools and hospitals. The infrastructure spend that we've made is actually giving young people the opportunity for these jobs. But most recently, one thing that I'm incredibly proud of is supporting an organisation based here in Western Sydney, run by Paul Breen, called Productivity Boot Camp. And this is for kids who perhaps have challenges at school and aren't used to learning in the traditional way to actually go and have an 8-week course where they're taught how to do a hands-on job in construction, hands-on job in plumbing or electricity, to give them that kick start. So we're actually going down to that level, specifically in different areas, including Western Sydney, to provide that hands-on experience through programs like that, but also through our TAFEs and apprenticeships. Every major project or every roadworks that you see happening in Western Sydney, or every hospital upgrade we're doing, and every major hospital is getting an upgrade, they have to hire a minimum number of apprenticeships to give young people the chance to get those jobs. What concerns me is the Labor Party has already said there's about 6 or 7 projects they're cancelling. That will cost us tens of thousands of jobs. A lot of them will be young people. But what we're also really interested in doing is, of course, giving young people a head start, but also retraining more mature workers. The other day, I met a woman who was in her 40s who'd just done an electrical apprenticeship working on a rail project. So we know that a lot of people are worried about the future of their jobs. So no matter what age anybody is, I want New South Wales to keep being the jobs capital of Australia, whether it's in the regions or in Western Sydney or Greater Sydney. And I also want everybody to have a hope that if you want to get a good job in New South Wales, whether you live in Western Sydney or anywhere else, you will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just quickly, David. We have to rescue TAFE. TAFE's been dismantled by this government. There are 172,000 fewer students in TAFE now than there were 8 years ago. 5,700 support teachers and support staff.
So how much more are you going to spend on TAFE?
Will be about $3 billion on TAFE with all their...
$3 billion.
Well, tell me, check that figure, David.
So hang on, Michael Daly. You're not sure, with education centrepiece of your election, you're not sure how much more you're spending on schools, and you're not sure how much more you're spending on TAFE?
I'll just check that figure and get back to you, David. Yeah.
All right. OK, let's go to our next question. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we'll grab... If we can get one up the back there, sir.
Now that the schools have a choice of choosing how to spend the money, whether for STEM or for any other things, so what about schools who doesn't get to choose STEM because STEM is very critical? And secondly, even the schools that have chosen STEM education, what kind of a support that the school and the staff gets it? Because what I personally feel is when you talk about STEM or technology, the staff or the teachers or the schools get a lot of stress.
Yeah.
So what are the plans, or how is that going to take off?
So you're talking about making sure the teachers have the support they need to deal with, a very important area of education.
Can I say, excellent question. And STEM, I didn't know what STEM was a few years ago. So it's science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And we know they're the jobs of the future. I just wanted to make that clear. I'm really excited about every single school, a public school in New South Wales has a STEM component to it. I was very proud last year to start the Premier's Coding Challenge to encourage kids in Year 7 and Year 8 to actually participate in these activities. When I was referring to equipment before, it might be laptops that kids have the chance to take home or otherwise about the funding that I was talking about. But every school has the capacity and the ability to make sure that kids are getting that expertise. In fact, once I went to a primary school in Western Sydney, 5- and 6-year-olds were learning very basic coding in terms of which is an element to help them with science and technology into the future. So it's very much part of the curriculum.
So for the teachers, what are they going to do?
Oh, the teachers get the extra resourcing, the support through curriculum, through teaching methods as well. They get incentives to encourage the children to participate in things like the Premier's Coding Challenge. But also what's really exciting for me in terms of our vision for Western Sydney and jobs is the new airport that we're building at Badgerys Creek, which the federal government's building. We're building a brand new airport city, and all the jobs of the future will be around those STEM subjects. It's going to be universities based there, the best companies around Australia and the world, providing opportunities for young people here to actually work in those industries.
Yep. The teachers need to know how to teach it. So, Michael Daly, just to address this question, what will you do?
All the programs in the budget at the moment will be supported, but as I say, when we roll out the 100% of Gonski funding and the extra 5,000 teachers come on board, we'll be able to support all of these programs in a much better way and provide that back-end support for teachers to do those things that you're referring to.
Okay, so there will be a specific cohort of that 5,000 that will teach STEM?
Yes, there will be, yes. And we will do that in conjunction with the Commonwealth. Yeah.
Okay, and do you know roughly what priority that'll be given?
Well, we'll roll that out in conjunction with the department and the experts and in the first term of government.
Okay. A question over here, sir.
Yeah, we know that there's a rise around the world for minor parties at the moment. This weekend there's an election on. If either of you get into a minority situation...
Sorry, we're just struggling with the audio on that microphone. I might, because this is a good question, if you wouldn't mind just standing up for me, sir. Oh, there we go.
We know that there's a rise in minority parties around the world. This weekend there's going to be an election. What are both of your strategies if one of the minor parties gains enough votes to have the balance of power, and what strategies are you going to adopt?
Thank you. Michael Daly, to you first. What happens if it's a hung parliament?
Well, I'm not aiming at a hung parliament, David.
But what if it is one? I'm sorry to jump in so quickly. The question is, what if there is a hung parliament?
Well, if there's a hung parliament, I've said there'll be no coalition with other parties, there'll be no deals with other parties. We'll govern, but I am aiming to govern in my own right. There'll be no coalition and no deals.
So no deals with the Greens?
No deals. They can support us on confidence and supply and things like that.
And that applies to all minor parties?
All minor parties.
You'll take the support of shooters?
We'll take the support of anyone that these people dishes up, but we will not be beholden to them, and we won't be in coalition with them, and we won't do deals with them. And in relation to the question that is on everyone's lips about the shooters party, I've said that there will be absolutely no watering down of gun laws in New South Wales. We will not be part of a parliament that waters down gun laws. Okay.
Premier, what happens if it's a hung parliament?
Well, obviously, I think for strong and stable government to continue in New South Wales, we don't want to be in that situation.
I'm sure you do.
It's the will of the people. I've not done a preference deal with the shooters. Mr Daly has. So in 19
Okay, but have you done a preference deal with the Liberal Democrats?
In the lower house, we're encouraging everybody to vote one for our Liberal and National
but you've been having a go at him over doing a deal with the shooters.
Yeah.
Liberal Democrats have some pretty strong views on gun laws.
In the lower house,
well.
I don't think in the lower house we have. I'll check that, but I definitely don't think we have at all.
Okay.
But I feel it's important for people to be honest about the preference deals they've done to get people.
We're talking here about a hung parliament. What happens then?
Well, obviously, I don't want that to be that situation because I feel strength and stability is the most important. I've already said I won't be dealing with the shooters. I don't believe in their values.
So if you would need their support to form a government,
I've
you would
already
say
made clear.
no.
I think values matter. I don't support bringing semi-automatics into New South Wales. I don't support giving 10-year-old guns, and I don't believe that we need to weaken the laws that came into place. And values mean something to me, and I've made a stand on that.
So you would not accept their support on supply and confidence?
Yeah.
Okay, but everyone else?
Well, I hope it doesn't get to that, but yeah.
But you would?
Well, we'd have discussions, yeah.
Okay, we've probably got time. Sir, right here.
You guys have unfortunately both inherited a lack of spending in New South Wales for decades. So, Premier, you've sold us out of a lot of our assets with the promise of creating a better New South Wales. Now, in the future, we've got nothing more to sell. Like you've mentioned earlier, Mr Daly, that we now re-inherited the M4 toll after it was taken off, and it was taken off by a Labor government from memory a while back. So how are we going to fund future spending? Are we going to sell more assets? Because they're, quite frankly, our assets.
Okay, it's a good question. Premier, let's start with you.
Yeah,
Will you sell any further assets?
We've said no, but I want to make this point. Because of all the infrastructure we're building, the people of New South Wales own more today than they did when we came to government. You own, on behalf of the community, more schools, more hospitals. These are assets we've built. So, in fact, if you look at our balance sheet, we now have our net worth as a state is now more than it has ever been. We are now a $600 billion economy in New South Wales, but our balance sheet, what all of us own as taxpayers, is more today than it was when we came to government, and that's because every time you build a new school, a new hospital, a new project, that belongs to the community, and I'm very proud of that.
Okay, so Sydney Water,
no,
you won't sell? The rest of the electricity network, you won't sell?
And if we were, we would have told you up front, which is what we did last time.
Michael Daly.
Firstly, Gonski funding $7.4 billion.
Thank you.
Cost of
so the difference is $7.4 billion.
But over how many years?
Over a 4-year term.
That's not true. That's wrong.
In conjunction with the Commonwealth.
That's wrong.
But for your part, let's let the Commonwealth answer for themselves. For your part?
Well, it's a package, David, so 7.4.
How much are you going to spend more on schools?
Well, sorry?
How much would you spend on schools?
On which capital?
How much of that $7.4 billion would be the New South Wales government?
It's a total $10 billion package when you add in cool schools with $800 million.
But how much would you spend?
On the Gonski funding?
Yes.
I think it's about $2.7 billion, David, out of the 7.4.
OK, so back to this question on asset sales.
Well, the Premier said just then, for the first time in a long time, there'll be no further privatisations. Her Treasurer described it as the golden key and said on a national news bulletin last year that there might have to be another round of privatisations. I can give you a hand-on-heart guarantee. There'll be no privatisation of hospitals. This government tried to privatise 5 of them. We caught them out and stopped them. No privatisation of hospitals. No privatisation of Sydney Water. No privatisation of any further assets at all. No privatisation of TAFE. Privatisation ends with me. You can ironclad guarantee there will be no privatisation under a Labor government.
All right, thank you both. And we have run out of time for questions. We're going to move to some brief closing statements. And we'll begin once again with Michael Daly.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time out to come and listen to us tonight. I've been someone who's loved elections since I was a little boy, and I know that sometimes people aren't as fascinated with politics as we are, but we have to be thankful that we're in a democracy, and all of you get once every 4 years to decide who you want to be the government. I've said that I don't think this government listens. I'll be a government. I will be a premier for people. I will put people first. We had a great saying after 23 years in public life that if you want to find an expert, they're not hard to find. They're called locals. You're locals. I'll listen to you. We'll formulate the policies, and together we'll make New South Wales a better place. There is hope. There is a better way. And I want to be that better way with your help on Saturday.
Mr Daly, thank you. Some final words from the Premier.
Thanks, David. I don't ever want to see New South Wales go backwards again. And unfortunately, for 16 long years, we went backwards when the Labor Party was in government. We've turned the state economy around, not for the sake of it, but now because we are making record investments in our schools, our hospitals, especially here in Western Sydney. I'm proud of the fact that every single hospital in Western Sydney has either had or is undergoing a major upgrade. I'm proud of the fact we are building rail lines to Western Sydney. We're improving the existing network. I'm proud of the fact we're taking pressure off families in relation to cost of living. But what I want to do is make sure we keep going. Our job is not yet done. There's still so much more to do, and it worries me if the Labor Party get in, because they've actually announced cancelling projects. I haven't heard a positive plan from them. And I know that when you make a decision to build something, not everybody's going to agree with you, but it's for our kids and it's for the grandkids into the future. It's for making sure we stay strong as a state, but also that we have the infrastructure and the services we need for the future. And I appreciate there's always differences in the community, opinions in the community about what needs to happen and when. But the fact that we've built 100 new hospitals or hospital facilities, we've got 100 in the pipeline. We've built 90 brand new schools across the state, and we've got 180 in the pipeline. My mission is to get the job done, to keep going, because we're not there yet, and we've got more to do to make sure that every person, no matter where they live in the state, Western Sydney, the regions, has the best opportunity for a good future.
All right.
Sorry, I'm a bit...
No. Would you please thank Gladys Berejiklian and Michael Daly? Thank you. Thank you both very much in the final days of this campaign for taking the time tonight to take all of these terrific questions. We know it's not an easy format, so we appreciate you both doing this. We wish you well in the final days of the campaign. And a big thank you to all of the questioners here tonight, to the undecided voters. Well done on some terrific questions. Don't forget your wristbands. There will be some boxes, I think, coming into the room as well. Put them in those, and we'll bring you the results for those watching at home, and for those watching online on the Daily Telegraph as well, the results of tonight's People's Forum. Would you please thank our leaders once again?
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And I'll hand over to Paul Murray now. Paul.
Thank you very much, David. Welcome to a